Millions of people in the Middle East face a scarcity of an essential resource, water. They get access to clean water only once a week. Join us as we travel to Egypt, Palestine, and Jordan to see the situation on the ground firsthand and explore local solutions.
Our water pressure is very low, and it only comes once a week, or even every 10 days. The amount of water is not enough. It is difficult to cover our basic needs. Also, the plants in the garden are barely alive. We have goats, and they need a lot of water too. The water is not enough for our domestic use. We can't clean the house properly when we only get water once a week. It's simply not enough.
Maysoon is not alone. There are millions like her in the Middle East. According to the International Water Management Institute, 17 countries in the Middle East will face absolute water scarcity by 2025. In this film, we explore local solutions for the Middle East water scarcity. We visit Egypt, Palestine, and Jordan to find out the situation on the ground.
The Middle East is going to demand more than its share of water increasingly because of its rise in population. The population is rising rapidly. It has risen twice, or risen 1.5 times in the past half century, and it's going to double in the next 50 to 80 years. Jordan at the moment only has about a quarter of the water it needs, so it's in a very serious position. It has big water needs. The water available is expensive, so it even has problems with its drinking water.
The village of Damia lies in the Jordan Valley, close to the border with Palestine. This dry region lies at the lowest and one of the hottest places on earth. Maysoon and her family have personally suffered from the water crisis.
Here in Damia, we suffer from two major problems. First, some people take water illegally from the major and central network, which weakens the pressure. That's why we bought the pump, to keep up the pressure. Second, the pipelines are old, more than 30 years old, and are so worn that the water is dirty and discolored. That's why we bought the filters, because we also have kids.
For years, central government managed the water supply in this region, and the total water for the region is not enough to meet the demand. Poor governance and distribution make the water crisis in Jordan worse.
The water that is allocated for this district is around 385 cubic meters, which is not enough for the people. That is why we can only give them water once a week. There are several reasons for the lack of services in this district. First, there is the illegal use from the network. People take from the central supply to feed, for example, their livestock without control or counters. Second, the central network is very old, so the pipes are worn out. But we hope we can reconstruct it with the resources available.
Both the government and users agree that poor networks, illegal use, and lack of services are main causes of the supply problem. But neither side talks to each other to find solutions. Communication itself is a problem.
We are always complaining to the Water Authority and the Ministry of Water, always. Here in my house I have piped water. In wintertime the pipes break almost once a day because of high pressure, and in summer the pressure is too weak. We ask them every time to come and fix them, but nobody comes to repair the pipes. Nobody.
It's not only domestic water users, but also farmers who complain about lack of government response. Abu Fala depends on irrigation. He complains that they aren't giving him enough water.
Our irrigation water depends on dams. The government distributes it to us. My land needs 24 hours, and I get 8 hours. That is not enough.
The role of our bureau is to guide the farmers on how to use the water efficiently on their farms. We show the farmers how they can use the water through a scheduling system for irrigation and the proper use of recycled and treated water. We also raise awareness on how much fertilizers they should use with any given amount of water.
The government-promoted drip irrigation system is not wide enough and won't take off the salt from the soil. We need to drain the surface completely because it is saline soil. Otherwise, the salt will stay.
Of course, we all know that Damia has a saline and chalky soil. So it needs salt-resistant crops that give a good harvest. We advise the farmers in Damia to plant trees like date palms, pears, pomegranates, and figs. These are trees that conserve water well.
First, the government advised us to plant tomatoes. Then the market price fell, so we abandoned it. Then they came and advised us to plant olive trees. The same thing happened. Now they are supporting the date palms, for which there seems to be a market. But for sure, if we have plenty of palms, they will be out of the market again, like the other crops. There are not enough markets. Our investment in agriculture is high, and the costs are higher than the profits. All of the farmers you see here have debts, and their lands are pledged to the government because of the high production costs and the lack of markets.
To tackle the many communication problems, a new initiative has started in Damia to bring together officials, water users and farmers. The plan is to get end users engaged in long-term planning by working together with government officials.
The major aim of the Empowers initiative is to facilitate the meetings between the members of the local communities and the officials who are in charge of water quality and delivery. Now, this is one of the meetings in Damia to set a common ground of communication and a shared perspective to reach a realistic strategy to solve the water problems.
The meetings in Damia resulted in a project that now provides the poorest households with proper water supply. Involving end users in water planning sets a precedent in a region where society is generally hierarchical. The Middle East is in a water crisis. In Jordan, the village of Damia now has good domestic water supply through involving end users. But the major problem is water for agriculture. Irrigation currently uses around 70% of the water resources, even though agriculture contributes less than 4% to the national income.
The only thing that's going to solve it is economic diversification. People not doing agricultural jobs. So every time you think you're going to solve the problem in the water sector, in irrigation, you're not going to succeed because there just isn't enough water.
The demand for water is more than the amount of water there's ever going to be, or until there's some radical technological solution that allows us to cheaply and easily make seawater into fresh water. But that's not on the horizon anytime soon. But neither is economic diversification. Millions and millions of people rely on water to live. They're farmers. They need the water for their crops. They need it for their livestock. They don't have an immediate option, and the states in the region aren't in a position to offer an immediate solution.
In Egypt, for instance, which has perhaps 70 million people, there must be 30 million people still involved in agriculture. The fact that there are so many of them means that they are a political force. You cannot tell farmers to stop using water because they'll die and their families will die. So the governance system is in a trap. It can't do anything about that until it's lifted the economy into a position where people don't need to have a job in agriculture. So Egypt's problem is that it has plenty of water for drinking and industry. It doesn't have enough water for its food.
Between 95 and 99% of the water in Egypt comes from the Nile. The Nile gives us around 55.5 billion cubic meters per year, and we in Egypt use and reuse 65.5 billion cubic meters per year.
Egypt is famous for its irrigation ever since the ancient Egyptians started to exploit the Nile. The country uses the water many times on the way down. In the lower delta, people are using almost 100% recycled water. Beni Suef is one of the poorest districts. Its more than 2 million people form 3% of Egypt's total population. The overwhelming majority works in agriculture. Demand for irrigation is high. At the same time, untreated wastewater pollutes the soils. Farmers and residents are desperate.
When they did this irrigation project, they said we'll water the acre for 8 Egyptian pounds. It didn't happen. They buried our old canals, which helped us, and they made covered pipes that were never used. The water now comes from the main canal. I buy or rent a motor pump to get it into my own land. The farmer, whether he owns or rents land, is suffering.
After we rented the land and planted it, we found that the wastewater pollutes it. It makes the plants go dry.
We tried tomatoes, they die. Beans too. Nothing survives this water.
The long tradition of irrigation in Egypt has developed into a water system where all users are connected. But only 5% of villages have a proper sewage system. This means that the ditches that are used for disposal fill up very quickly. When they're emptied, the sewage ends up in the irrigation system. The situation's now out of control.
People empty these ditches and try to find a place to dump the wastewater. So they throw it in drainage canals, and in the canals coming from the Nile, which pollutes the water that is used for irrigation. So the problems are all connected.
The biggest part of the problem is in the attitude of the citizens themselves. Everyone tries to water their land at the same time. Those at the beginning of the canal take all the water, so it doesn't reach the end. Especially in long canals, 7 or 10 kilometers long, that supply 5 or 6 villages. If people divide irrigation time like in the past, some at day and some at night, or if they form a group that arrange irrigation days, it would be organized.
There is a problem of trust between the final user of the service and the service provider. One of the things we found out while talking with people is that because they are not sure when the water will reach their lands, when it comes, they use it excessively. which in turn stops the water from reaching somewhere else. And this only moves the problem from one place to the other. And this could be easily solved if people trusted each other, if they coordinated with each other in a better way.
Aside from a lack of trust, it's been difficult for farmers to approach officials. A new scheme in Beni Suef plans to bridge this gap.
I, as an individual in the village, cannot go to the governor. They would not let me in. They will tell me to go away. They'll say, "Who are you to meet the governor?" The Empowers initiative puts us in the same room with them. Now they listen to us. Before this, it was impossible to meet anyone. Impossible.
I didn't have much contact with the field, except the usual phone calls asking me for water. I didn't know their conditions. But now that we have sat together, we have got to know their problems and why the water doesn't reach the end of the canals. We can help them and they can help us to supply the water to every peasant.
We developed a vision for our village, then formed teams that worked inside the community, men and women, and started collecting data. Then we drew a problem tree. We found 5 problems. The first one was that 45% of the people did not have clean drinking water. Then we wrote 5 projects. The first one was for buying a tractor to take out sewage from the water system.
The tractor now collects and transports sewage to the nearby treatment plant on a regular basis. It's helped many of the end users in Beni Suef to get rid of their sewage without polluting the system. Like the efforts in Jordan, the improved communication helped in more efficient water and sanitation services and reduced pollution of irrigation water. While this works at local level, it'll not be enough to solve the overall water scarcity problem. According to Tony Allen, irrigated agriculture demands too much water and is not viable.
We need to do everything. I'm not at all saying that participation by farmers in the management of systems is wrong. It's absolutely a good thing to do in addition, but it's only going to be a part of the solution.
There is no short or simple solution to the water problem. As long as there are more people and they want more water, then the challenge is always going to be there. As well as the big solutions, there are also quite a lot of much smaller solutions that we can try to deal with now.
Innovative ideas of water users often provide important solutions to the local water shortages. In the Palestinian town of Methaloon, people have many ideas to solve the increasing water problems. Mustafa has developed a small but effective system to reuse wastewater in his household.
This is wastewater which goes into the barrel. When it has filled up the barrel, we can use it for watering the trees. This is dishwater. We'll water the plants with it. I want to go and water the fig tree out there because it hasn't been watered in a long time. It has many positive aspects. It saves all the water in our home. Besides that, it is also good for the environment.
Many water projects on the West Bank are not sustainable because Israel controls most of the water resources through their occupation of Palestinian lands. So, can small solutions like Mustafa's lead to some improvement in a difficult political situation?
The fact that we still do not have a final agreement with our neighboring countries, that puts Palestine and Palestinians in a very disadvantaged positions where the water available for Palestinians is not really equally available like the case for other neighboring countries, whether it is Jordan or Israel. Not only that, of course, end users and household, you have practices that it is being practiced at household levels which are not really also known to the other households or known to the other people in the same area, in the same vicinity. And our interest as well to bring those people together and therefore let them learn from each other's experience and practices. With this, that will help a lot, or that will contribute in really improving the water situation in general.
Mustafa is not only concerned to make sure to use water efficiently at home, he has much bigger plans. His town is located next to a plain that fills up with rainwater every winter, sometimes up to 4 meters high. The rainwater drains away without being used. Moreover, the resulting flood destroys the agricultural fields in the plain. The Maythaloon inhabitants own more than 2/3 of the plain. Mustafa and his fellow townsmen have an idea to use the plain for water supply. It means drilling a well at the lowest point of the plain to guide the winter floodwater into the ground so it can be pumped up in the town. Encouraged by a new initiative, Mustafa decides to discuss the plan with local water officials.
The water problem. They dug a well in the town here. They came and said, we dug an underground well. We haven't seen any well or water. Nothing. The problem is in the town.
What I know is that when planning took place in the Maythaloon town, you identified two problems: the problem of flooding of the plain and the problem of drinking water. After the planning procedure, you reached the conclusion that using the water from the plain in this area resolves two problems. We will reduce the floods and we would save large areas of agricultural land, which can be sown. At the same time, we can use this water to supply the underground water source. As a result, it would increase the amount of drinking water.
With the backup of the authorities, Mustafa and his townsmen have now developed their idea into a viable proposal to attract international funding. They hope to start the project next year. It's the first time that end users are involved from the beginning of a water project in Palestine. That's a big cultural change.
Getting users involved, getting consumers to take responsibility for their action, has been identified as one of the ways we can move forward. That the problems of water are very seldom, it's not that there's one big problem leading to another big problem, it's that the actions, that the very small actions of millions and millions of people, all added up together, create a big problem. And if you want to solve the big problems, you have to start somewhere down at the bottom. You have to solve the small problems first.
Poor water supply is often a problem of lack of cooperation. Whilst water supply and sanitation services used to be centrally governed from the top down, end users are now starting to be involved in planning from the bottom up. The stories of Jordan, Egypt and Palestine show that this process can offer local solutions.
We still hope, of course, it is not really the end of the story, but we still hope that this kind of process will be a kind of a culture where everybody will participate in developing the plans, where everybody's interest is reflected, and therefore everybody can then be held accountable for whatever things has been agreed upon between all those kind of end users.
UN designated 2008 as International Year of Sanitation. Yet more than 2.5 billion people worldwide have no proper sanitation. The UN wants to halve this number within 7 years. Flush toilets and expensive sewer systems are the answer, but there's another, more productive way: ecological sanitation. The history of using water to flush our human waste dates as far back as Greek and Roman times. Then, public toilets were social places to chat and network. The modern flush toilet originates from the Elizabethan water closet, a British invention.
I'm sitting on a replica of Sir John Harrington's flushing water closet. He's often credited with being the first Englishman to develop a flushing toilet. The toilet we know is really, it's an indoor phenomenon, so it's really 20th century new housing that toilets are in homes.
The problem is that a flush toilet uses a lot of water, 27 litres per day.
A newly installed toilet should be flushing about 6 litres on a full flush. Some toilets have an option for a half flush. The situation has improved from that point, but certainly we're still using a lot of water every time we flush.
So conventional sewer systems waste a lot of drinking water and nutrients. Conserving drinking water is perhaps most urgent in arid regions, such as the Arab world. In these dry areas, saving water is vital for survival. Ahmed Rabi and his colleague Latifa Bousselmi of the Water Technology Research Centre in Tunis are searching for ways to save domestic water and reuse human waste. One idea is to introduce a so-called dry toilet. This toilet uses no water at all for flushing. The dry toilet collects feces and urine separately in two compartments, the urine down the small hole and the feces down the larger. Fresh urine is a sterile solution. By not mixing the two, the pathogens in the solids cannot contaminate urine. The two products can be treated differently for future reuse. This could help both saving water and stopping wasting our waste.
Donc le problème, c'est qu'on utilise beaucoup d'eau.
The problem is that we use a lot of water. There's the agricultural, industrial and urban sector who all use a lot of water. So in the light of that, we're looking at new concepts and technologies like toilets with double reservoirs and dry toilets.
Ahmed visits a sheep farmer, Mohammed bin Ali, who lives close to the school. Mohammed is not connected to a sewage system. Therefore, he built a cesspit to collect waste. He is very careful using water.
So, when someone uses the toilet, he washes himself and then fills a bucket and pours it onto the toilet. This saves water. The water from the washing machine we collect in a barrel and use it to wash the floors. Also, I don't take a shower directly, but use a bucket to wash. I use only one bucket to save both water and money, because the water bill's high, so we have to save our water.
Mohammed's household would be an excellent candidate to use the first modern dry toilet in Tunisia. So Ahmed and Latifa show him the dry toilet and explain how to use it. Mohammed is full of questions, obviously very interested.
This is much better. All the citizens can follow me and try it themselves. People will benefit from this, and all the nutrients will be of benefit for them. If we collect our waste and reuse it on the land, the people and farmers who have land here in the neighborhood will benefit. It'll make the land much stronger, you see.
So finally, Ahmed and Latifa found someone willing to use a dry toilet. It means Chofesh will be the first Tunisian village to use modern dry toilets to solve the lack of sanitation, cut water consumption and reuse human waste. Small beginnings. Is there a future for eco-sanitation?
When we're talking about environmental protection, I think the first step is to think about where are going my feces and my urine. I think when people are thinking about that, then we will be on the right track.
For this district is around 385 cubic meters, which is not enough for the people. That is why we can only give them water once a week. There are several reasons for the lack of services in this district. First, there is the illegal use from the network. People take from the central supply to feed, for example, their livestock without control or counters. Second, the central network is very old, so the pipes are worn out. But we hope we can reconstruct it with the resources available.
Both the government and users agree that poor networks, illegal use and lack of services are main causes of the supply problem. But neither side talks to each other to find solutions. Communication itself is a problem.
We are always complaining to the Water Authority and the Ministry of Water. Simply not enough.
Maysoon is not alone. There are millions like her in the Middle East. According to the International Water Management Institute, 17 countries in the Middle East will face absolute water scarcity by 2025. In this film, we explore local solutions for the Middle East water scarcity. We visit Egypt, Palestine and Jordan to find out the situation on the ground.
The Middle East is going to demand more than its share of water increasingly because of its rise in population. The population is rising rapidly. It has risen twice or risen 1.5 times in the past half century, and it's going to double in the next 50 to 80 years. Jordan at the moment only has about a quarter of the water it needs, so it's in a very serious position. It has big water needs. The water available is expensive, so it even has problems with its drinking water.
The village of Damia lies in the Jordan Valley, close to the border with Palestine. This dry region lies at the lowest and one of the hottest places on earth. Maysoon and her family have personally suffered from the water crisis.
Here in Damia, we suffer from two major problems. First, some people take water illegally from the major and central network, which weakens the pressure. That's why we bought the pump, to keep up the pressure. Second, the pipelines are old, more than 30 years old, and are so worn that the water is dirty and discolored. That's why we bought the filters, because we also have kids.
For years, central government managed the water supply in this region, and the total water for the region is not enough to meet the demand. Poor governance and distribution make the water crisis in Jordan worse.
The water that is allocated
Our water pressure is very low, and it only comes once a week, or even every 10 days. The amount of water is not enough. It is difficult to cover our basic needs. Also, the plants in the garden are barely alive. We have goats, and they need a lot of water too. The water is not enough for our domestic use. We can't clean the house properly when we only get water once a week.
Millions of people in the Middle East face a scarcity of an essential resource, water. They get access to clean water only once a week. Join us as we travel to Egypt, Palestine and Jordan to see the situation on the ground firsthand and explore local solutions.